how much work is actually done during a given workday. The influencers that are in that space are not achieving success.
People using this as a center of their self-worth and saying working hard is what makes me worth something. Hey, welcome to Dead Batter. Today, we are going to talk about mental health, something that I'm very excited to share with you all. I have with me Matt Brown, founder of a company called Chimney, of which I love your mission, Matt. I want to give you some time. Please talk to us about what you all do, and then we'll jump into some questions about why hustle culture is toxic.
You got it. Yeah, Jeremy, thanks for having me on the show. So Chimney Trail Health is a behavioral healthcare company, and we specialize in creative adaptations of something called cognitive behavioral therapy. Specifically, cognitive behavior theory, it crosses a lot of different boundaries, but it's this idea that your brain needs some guardrails, and every feeling that you have might not be based in reality. Every feeling is driven by a thought, and that thought can sometimes be illogical. And there's some really great reasons based in our evolutionary biology to explain that. So we have a company that teaches people about that and teaches them how to overcome the cognitive distortions that lead to destructive anxiety, depression, and sometimes even suicide.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks. And again, wonderful mission. I like to say that when I'm talking to my kids about this, because I know it's not the same, but children are little emotional beings, and we talk about if you feel a certain way, ask your feelings to give you facts. That sort of can help you ground yourself. So I promise I won't undercut your entire work with my toddler life theories, but it's where I'm at. So I think today I want to talk about this concept of hustle culture, and I want to define that because the word hustle, what it means in the dictionary, among other things, is to force someone to hurriedly arrive at a destination. And hustling can be seen in a positive outlook. Like if you're on a football field and you're practicing, the coach is like, hustle, hustle, and sort of, again, pushing you to do better. But then there's also this other flip side of hustle where it is a toxic idea that forces people to work so hard that they lose sight of what they're trying to achieve, right? And we're going to talk about things like the effort, productivity versus effort curve, and when is hustling good, when is hustling bad, and how harder doesn't get results. And so let's just sort of kick it off with sort of the first question: is hustling good? Apart from my silly football analogy, right? In work culture, in what we show up to do every day, is hustling something, in your opinion, Matt, that can be good, or is it really just a really bad idea that we need to trash?
Okay, so great question. Let me first start by saying that your toddler analogy about asking your feelings to give you facts is beautiful. It's like it's oftentimes the most simple interpretation of the things that we're studying that have the most impact. And there's a reason that we have little sayings, that carry us through, and that's a great one. So I'm going to use it.
Go for it.
I'm stealing
You can have it.
Cool. So is hustle good? Yes, hustle is good. There's no question about it. You only have a certain number of years on planet Earth to achieve what you'd like to achieve, whether it's a redeemed social condition, as I can't remember what poem that comes from, but whether you're trying to affect a redeemed social condition or just like plant a garden or raise family, whatever you want to do, you only have a certain number of years to do it. So you have to get down to business and actually do something and accomplish something. If that's important to you. But I think what you're getting at is that there's a massive difference between sort of maintaining purpose and a sense of urgency toward accomplishing a mission, and this idea of hustle culture, which sometimes just has you moving around frantically, not necessarily in the direction of whatever you're trying to achieve. So yeah, this idea of frantically moving around in various directions, but not necessarily in the direction that you want to be going. Mm-hmm. And I think that hustle culture breeds that, where you're doing something technically, but it might not be necessarily the things that need to be done. So this idea of slowing down and being more deliberate in the way that you spend your time and mindful in the way that you spend your time, I think is hugely important.
I think of it this way. If you've ever had a hamster or gone to a pet store and seen a hamster running on a wheel, are you impressed? I mean, not really. I don't
Yeah,
know.
that's
Maybe if
right.
you really like hamsters, maybe say,
Yeah.
wow, that's a completely badass hamster running freaking 3,000 miles an hour on a wheel. But they're not accomplishing anything. They're just going hard for the
Right.
sake of going hard. Well, again, I back up. That hamster's obviously clearly accomplishing something. It's getting its exercise, right? So don't flame me in the comments on that.
Right.
But to apply that to sort of the human element, like you need, and you stated it so eloquently, you need a direction and a purpose. You don't want to just work hard for the sake of working hard. And where I see hustle culture being a problem is exactly what you stated, is that it's about people using this as a center of their self-worth and saying working hard is what makes me worth something. And then in turn, you externalize that and you look at others and you say, well, you don't work as hard as I do and you're not as good as me because you don't believe that hustling is the centerpiece of your psyche, right? And it's one of those things where it's all about, I like to say that difference between confidence and arrogance is how you treat people. It really is about how you treat people. If your hustle is, as you said, building a family, creating company, both of us on this call, we both created companies. We're no strangers to hustle, right? And it's very difficult. And some days you wake up and you're like, I really don't want to do this. I just want to go back to bed and go to sleep.
That's true.
And I have to figure out, how do I motivate myself to continue doing the things that drive my business forward and that change whatever I am. And you guys have an amazing mission. I'm just, building a consulting firm. So, if anything, a little different there. But at the end of the day, I think it's really about how you treat others and how you think about how that impacts your work ethic. And I have nothing against good work ethic. That's very important to life. But the hustle culture, as you said, that idea that I'm better than you because I'm air quote hustling, is toxic and complete garbage.
Yeah, I'm totally with you. I spent a bunch of years in uniform, so I understand this concept of sense of urgency. Like they always say that in
Yeah.
boot camp, or like I went to the Naval Academy, that we had plebe summer,
Yep.
and everything you did needed to be with a sense of urgency. And then you jump on, I don't know, whatever your social media bad habit du jour is, like whether it's Instagram or TikTok, and you see like David Goggins and
Yeah.
Cameron Haynes, and there's all of these influencers that are they're very obviously successful in whatever it is that they do, and there's like some like fractional part of humanity that watches them and is like drawing a lot of inspiration, but the the stay hard and the nobody cares, work harder, like that sort of ethos. I mean, I've done hard military things. That doesn't necessarily resonate with me. And in fact, uh, quite the opposite. I'm of the
Yeah.
camp where you have to protect the asset.
Yeah.
And the asset, if you're starting a company or raising a family or whatever the case might be, the asset is you. And it doesn't mean like when you're having a bad day that you say nobody cares, work harder. Maybe it does mean that if working harder is centering yourself and slowing down and
Right.
trying to be more deliberate. Yeah.
Well, I think that feeds perfectly into the next point, is that working harder doesn't always get you better results, right? And going back to the story of you mentioned David Goggins. Again, I hope I don't get a bunch of Goggins flame wars in my comments, but I know there's a story where this dude is obviously incredibly strong mentally, way stronger than me. And he ran a race with a broken knee or something of that. If that had been me, I'd have been pieced out immediately because, again, you just said it, protect the asset. If I continue to run a race on a broken knee, I can do permanent damage to my leg and I will no longer be able to walk. It doesn't matter how hard your mental state is if you're doing physical damage to your body that will, in essence, put you out of commission. And I think that's the important idea. Is it's not always about working harder. That doesn't always get you better results, right? Sometimes you have to work smarter and you have to think about how to creatively solve a problem, right? Extending that analogy back to before we had lights, that analogy would be, we'll just build bigger fires instead of going and inventing the light bulb, which is a new and innovative technology that allows humanity to become what we are today. So, don't just build bigger fires. Think about how you can be more effective and efficient in creating the solution to the problem that's in front of you.
This video is sponsored by us.
To continue our mission of providing valuable educational resources to current and future software engineers and tech professionals, we've officially launched the Dev Better newsletter. Our monthly newsletter will bring highlights of the tech industry right to your inbox at the end of every month. Within each Dev Better newsletter, you'll find the top tech news stories, job postings that we believe are worth your time, and more importantly, development tips for your ever-growing knowledge base. If you think this is something you'd read, we've left a link in the description for you to subscribe for free. Now let's get back to the video. I love your background. Talk to us a little bit more about harder doesn't get better results. What have you seen in your life that resonates with this point where working smarter got you there as opposed to just hustling harder?
Yeah. So this is like the not so secret of all of that, like hustle and work hard industry. That those like the influencers that are in that space are not achieving success with nobody cares, work harder and like the hustle culture. They are being quite deliberate.
Right.
Like they might have social media accounts and it's posting every day, but there's very deliberate planning of whatever is posted. It's not just like frenetic, constantly posting and just like doing it for the sake of doing it. It's maybe in the early days it was that, but now it's a laser beam. And so the same as, starting a company or in my military experience, for your listeners, I went to the Naval Academy a million years ago. I thought I was going to be a naval officer until they kicked me out, like because I was too old or something. Life had different plans for me. But I did some, really interesting things. I deployed to Iraq with the Army. I got to be the captain of one of our Navy ships in San Diego. I got to work with the Navy SEAL teams. I get to do all these things. And I can tell you that in lieu of a hustle culture, there is a discipline culture. It's this idea that you set a goal and then success or failure in your pursuit of that goal has very little to do with how much you're sweating. In fact, it's almost like the more you're sweating, like maybe the less cool you are.
Yeah.
Like there's this idea that you should be able to do things with a level of coolness and competence that takes discipline and practice.
Yep.
So rather than the hustling, it's more like in all of those endeavors, whether it's business or any of the military stuff or even raising kids, it's being able to discipline yourself to take a little bit at a time and execute perfectly. So 20 minutes a day. If you're trying to learn to play the piano, like 20 minutes a day, execute perfectly.
Right.
And even if you only learn like 3 or 4 notes, those 3 or 4 notes are going to be sweet music. And it's like that across the board.
Yeah, it's about, and as you said, it's about a snowball. You start and then you continue to discipline yourself to move forward with purpose. And I think that's the big difference between hustle culture and a culture of discipline, which I love that. I respect that immensely. Is the discipline is what drives you to execute on the task at hand. And the discipline also instills intelligence in that you're thinking, hold on a second, I've done this way 5 times. Maybe there's a better way, right? And in business, we see this all the time. This is what the big companies are chasing, is they're chasing teams that look at problems and say, hold on a minute, I know we've done it this way 100 times before, but what if we just tweak this one little piece to see if we can get some efficiencies? Or what if we added this thing I learned over here in Kanban to our Scrum development lifecycle? Or what if, we talk to our customers in this way and we ask them questions a little differently to turn that into business value for the broader business. And again, if it's all about just go hard, work late, stay up all night, then you don't give your employees a chance to figure out smarter ways to solve problems, which is the next kind of concept. We have this curve, and we'll toss it up on the screen, of effort versus productivity. And it's a bell curve, right? So you start with, you're putting in effort, and eventually you reach in development, you reach a state called flow, where you're headphones on, or maybe you're in a pod talking to people and you're writing code and you're executing and you get it done and you're kind of at your peak state of proficiency. Well, psychology shows that you can't maintain this for a long period of time before the signal degrades and you start kind of getting on the other side. And I've been the recipient of this a lot. And Matt, I'd love your perspective too. My story is, I have worked on large software projects where I have spent hours and hours and hours writing code, cutting PRs, executing, doing the thing. After about 4 hours of concentrated coding, my brain is mush. I'm done. Like, I'm checked out. Now, most of us will continue going because we have 8-hour work days in the States, right? So we want to be productive. We want to do our thing. But eventually you reach a point to where you're even beyond fatigue. So when you walk into the 10th hour, the 11th hour, the 12th hour of doing work, and those of you who have been up for giant production pushes, or you're in the middle of a bug that's a huge issue and your company's losing money, you've experienced this where you're just throwing crap against the wall and praying that it solves the problem, or you're even coming up with weird ways to get by the problem with a workaround so that you can at least get the business up and functional. Now, I am not saying that is hustle culture. That's not at all toxic. That's doing what you need to do under pressure to solve the problem. Where it becomes toxic is where this is an expectation of you should always do this, and it's not the exception of the rule. So for me, after about 10 hours, I'm bleary-eyed. I'm up at 5 a.m. trying to fix stuff. I'm making huge mistakes. I'm making all kinds of problems. Less of a challenge I would expect in like a software engineering perspective, but if you have people's lives on the line, it's 1,000 times more important. So to me, that's where you need to, as a sweet spot, figure out where your organization can say, okay, at this point, we're going to call it, and you guys can go home and come back in the next day to continue sort of doing what we need to do. So Matt, what are your perspectives on that?
I think you're right on the money. And I also don't think that the 3 hours or 4 hours of concentrated coding in that flow state is, so there's a great study, and I can't remember who commissioned it, but I read it in Brookings. It was the Brookings Institute put out this white paper on it. And it was talking about, it was a UK based study, and they were saying like how much work is actually done during a given workday. And they determined that by like, if you factor in every minute spent working at a place of work in a corporate environment, it's about 3.5 hours of actual productive work that's getting done. Everything else is like going to the bathroom, getting a hot drink, socializing with coworkers, like selling your couch on Facebook Marketplace, like whatever. Whatever is just like not work. 3.5 hours is what you're getting out of folks most days. So if you're pumping out like 4 hours of legit flow state, I think you're probably in like the top 1% of human productivity, because most everybody else can't get there without a lot of practice,
right?
Like without like deliberately trying to get good and enter that flow state. So in a business context where I think you just mentioned it can get toxic, I think everybody's brains work differently. There's folks who have like touches of ADHD or something that could classify them as more of like a distributed thinker. And then there's people who are able to clutch into this flow state a little bit more easily. I think where you can get like run into some toxicity in the workplace is where you're not adaptive to other people's thinking methods.
Yeah.
And you think that everybody is on your wavelength. And when you happen to be working on something, particularly since we've got, remote work and Slack and those sorts of productivity tools. I mean, I catch myself doing it a lot where I'll fire off a message because I happen to be in this entrepreneurial flow state, and I will expect an answer.
Yep.
And it is absolutely ridiculous.
Yep. I've
like,
done that.
That person is not working right now.
Yep.
It makes no sense for me. I mean, hell, it might be somebody in another country, not even in the same time zone.
Right.
But I have like this physiological need to get an answer. And it's toxic in two directions. One, it sets an unrealistic expectation for your teammate. But then two, you do physical damage to yourself while you're waiting for the answer. Like all of the cortisol and stress hormones that your body experiences are made manifest, and you're waiting for this ridiculous answer that you probably shouldn't have. Last thought on this is that U.S. Navy, you have to stand watches, whether you're aboard a ship, a submarine, in an aircraft. Most of the time, those watches are 5 hours or less. And there's a reason for that. It's because like maintaining this idea of deliberate focus for something longer than that is borderline superhuman. So There may be circumstances if you have a team, like on the bridge of a ship, there's a team of people and you can sort of like rely on each other to make up where your shortcomings happen to be over the course of a watch. But even that is 5 hours and that's it. Um, we probably need to focus on sleep better in the armed forces, but the watch duration, I think we've got down to a science.
That's great. So let's bring it all home and talk about how this affects people. We've kind of danced around the issue and given some anecdotes, but you and your company, I mean, you're here to talk about how mental health is an issue in veterans and just also in the population at large. So I want your perspective. Like, hustle culture obviously affects people in different ways depending on who you are, right? You're a buyer, you buy into it, you follow it, you become an evangelist of it, or you know that it's perhaps not for me and maybe it's a thing that's toxic and could hurt me. So talk to me about what you've seen and how you all are looking to help solve this problem where mental health is just a huge challenge in our society today.
Yeah, Jeremy, you're right. So mental health, the Surgeon General came out and said that we are living through an epidemic of loneliness and that behavioral health related challenges are the health challenge of our age, not the behavioral health challenge or whatever, but the health challenge of our age. So yes, Chimney Trail exists in part to not like push back against hustle culture
Yeah.
necessarily. I think hustle culture is sort of like a symptom of a broader issue.
Yeah.
But yeah, we help people work through that stuff. Um, we live in an age where we have immediate access to content of like an infinite number of topics. It's like it's so much information that it is impossible to categorize or even process as a human. And in a lot of ways, that's incredible because you can learn about anything that you could ever want to learn about, and it's like a superpower. But on the other hand, there used to be, I'm not saying that we need to move back to the 60s or 70s, but it used to be that if you were a kid and you were an aspiring musician, you would play in your community band or your church band, and your community would give you a bunch of positive reinforcement, and it would continue you on this journey of becoming a better musician. And then eventually, maybe you play for a school orchestra or your city orchestra or whatever. But now we live in a world where a kid can access TikTok and Instagram or whatever and see a genius level musician that's the same age
Yeah.
playing somewhere else in the world, and it completely deflates them. And they're like, why even
Hmm.
bother? And so that not just happens for musicians or whatever, but it happens no matter what your career field or what your interests are. You dial in and you see savants working in the space, and then you're like, the hell with it. Like
Yeah.
I'm never going to be that good because you didn't have a lifetime of positive reinforcement to get you there. So I think what Chimney Trail does is it teaches you about the cognitive distortions that every single human brain suffers. Everybody thinks they're rational. I'd encourage you to read a book called Thinking Fast and Slow by Daniel Kahneman, and it explains why you're inherently not rational. You think in terms of prospect theory, and because we think in terms of prospects, we develop these distortions that can take us to some pretty dark places. Chimney Trail teaches folks how to understand those cognitive distortions and gives you strategies for overcoming them. And then if you see a kid on TikTok who's better at you than something, you're able to put it in the proper perspective and continue about your life, just admiring the fact that they were born with this genius level talent rather than being deflated by it.
Right.
And it's like not just the kid example, but for all of us.
Yeah, after watching Guitar YouTube, I pretty much decided I need to sell everything I own and completely quit.
Totally.
No,
Yeah.
that's awesome, and I love that. I think that we need more of this in our world. As you said, we are all so connected. I grew up a millennial where none of this happened. I grew up in a rural town in North Georgia, where the way you got to know people is you went to church or you went to the grocery store and you saw your friends there, or you went to the high school football game and you saw people in person. Now we live in a world where everyone's connected. Everybody knows what everybody else is doing. And I'd never thought about being exposed to this immense talent causing a mental issue. So I learned something today. Thanks, Matt. I feel the same
Cool.
way. I go watch some amazing guitarist like Nuno Betancourt or whatever and see how good they're doing. And I'm like, wow, I'm terrible. I should never, ever do that again. But to sort of rekindle that love for the instrument is a thing that you need to see in yourself and stop comparing yourself to what other people are doing. And I think you mentioned loneliness. That is a key piece. When you're lonely, you think everybody else is better than you and you don't want to talk to them. You don't feel like you have anything in common with people. So I love what y'all are doing. I encourage everybody to check out Chimney Trail. Matt, where can we find you on the internet?
So we're at www.chimneytrailhealth.com. We right now don't have a direct to consumer offering, but we're partnering with the Department of Defense, Fortune 500 companies, and even mid and small size companies to provide leadership and teamwork training based on cognitive behavior theory and prospect theory. And it's actually a ton of fun. We're going and delivering this stuff, and folks are they're writing me emails afterward, and they're like, "Hey, man, Matt, I legit thought I was crazy. It turns out I was just dealing with one of these distortions that you pointed out." So the training is great. It's a ton of fun, and hope we can work with you.
Love it. Awesome. Thanks a lot, Matt. We'll see y'all on the next one.